It's the Stellaris Museum Campaign Part 2. In the previous part, we got off to a rough start when the enemy dared to resist us, but we soon found our stride and started stealing the population of other factions to collect into our museum, thus preventing me from having to play the game, which is of course the real objective here. I eventually realised I could just form protectorates out of everyone and then later integrate them to steal their entire population at once. So that's what we're doing now. We're just going to go around the galaxy and win a subjugation war against every faction so that we can have them all as protectorates and pull them in whenever we like. Here I am setting up such a war using this cheeky diplomatic move where you just say, "Be my vassal," and if they refuse, then you are legally allowed to force them to be your vassal. Much better than just declaring war or claiming their territory normally, as far as I can tell. So here we go. In this case, we're actually fighting two factions. It's some big religious faction in the south and the remains of the faction I was fighting in the first part, because they were a vassal of the bigger faction. We're going to send fleets in two directions to attack. After I work out that you have to unpause the game in order for you to get military access to your enemies, and then off we go. As for the war itself, there's not going to be that much to it, because the half-dead faction we already killed last time has virtually nothing, and the bigger faction has a bit more than nothing, but not enough for me to have any significant battles with them. So essentially we just need to go around and occupy their territory, which will take a long time because they do have a lot of territory. And we're going to face the same thing as before, where the enemy will send the odd, like, really weak fleet to go and recapture little bits that I've captured after my strong fleet has moved through, the bane of my existence. But while that's happening, here's the real action. We have integrated the protectorate I formed last time. I wanted to try this method out. So now we control all of their stuff. They've got loads of terrible ships I'll disband, but more importantly, we have like 10 planets here, so we need to do something with them. First, we'll create some jobs on the Birch world, because we're about to gain a lot of extra population, and then we'll start using the resettle thing to just drag everything that they have into our museum, ready to be happy and healthy for all time, or something. Now in theory I need to also disband all of the outposts, which will mean I don't occupy their territory anymore. But it says in that tooltip you're not allowed to do that while you're at war with someone. Not quite sure why, maybe it screws with the AI or something. So we actually have to fail the challenge run again now by keeping their territory, which does make a material difference because all the little research stations and such will make us a tiny bit extra income. Anyway, we need to just finish this big war as soon as possible, and then we'll get back on track for the second time restarting the challenge run mid-game. This is truly strict. Here you can see we've now got loads of people in our Birch world, 360 or so pop. I think that's about the amount I actually got to the first time I played with the Birch world. I can't quite remember actually, it was something like that, but this could be me remembering from the mid-game or something. I feel like we're doing better than we did before, at the very least, and all of those people will now be put to work generating massive amounts of resources. We are losing resources right now, but we'll sort that out later. Here was the most significant battle of our war in the south. We faced a couple of weak fleets at the same time, but we're already so far ahead in tech that they can't stop us. I was surprised. We just have like 10 doubly upgraded research labs, researching constantly, and not many other buildings. That's enough to beat everyone else. As I mentioned in the last part, the AI doesn't focus on research so much, and I guess they don't know they can buy exotic gas off the market to get upgraded research labs. They'll have to wait until they have the buildings that generate exotic gases. I don't know where we're buying the exotic gases from, but we're just getting them magically. So we're doing very well. The market is so exploitable. I think the real challenge is doing this without buying and selling resources constantly. Anyway, as you can see, we do win this war after a while. Now we have 2 new protectorates, and after 10 or so in-game years, we'll be allowed to integrate them and pull them into the Birch world if we want, and maybe we don't want because they'll be generating population for us while they're out there doing nothing. And now that we're at peace, we can go ahead and do what I was meant to do earlier, get rid of all the territory that we gained from our previous integration. Once that's done, it leaves a nice empty bit of galaxy, which could still work for us because the neighbouring factions might expand in there, take the planets, start making pops, and then later we'll take those pops as well, so opening up these spaces should help us in the long term. That's that then really, everyone goes home, we'll go back to the Birch world and upgrade our ships with all of the latest techs that were researched during the campaign period, make an even stronger fleet, and then just do it to someone else. You can see that strangely in this galaxy there's a large portion of it that's just unoccupied. I wondered whether I accidentally set the number of factions to be lower than the default or something. Because the AI hasn't filled out the entire galaxy, there's a massive void. I figured maybe I need to do one of these special projects to make contact with aliens so that they will appear there. Maybe I just can't see them. But that's not how it works actually. There is actually nobody there, so that sucks for us because that's probably a whole bunch of planets that nobody is growing pops for us to steal on. And of course it's tempting for me to go and take all that territory myself, but that's against the rules. So who shall we kill next? I thought it might as well be the Seban Empire. Because we recently took out their fleets, they probably haven't built them back that well. So might as well go in there and do it again. We already know we can do it. So we start the war once our fleets are conveniently just outside their borders. And that's that. We're going to run on in. They probably won't be ready for us and we'll take all of their stuff. And once again this proved to be another war where we're just so far ahead that there's nothing the enemy can do. Here's a battle to represent this war happening. They've got some stuff there, but unless you have a comparable fleet strength, the effective damage you'll do is just 0, because damaging shields and armor doesn't really count, or even damaging hulls doesn't count because it just gets repaired afterwards once you capture a shipyard or something. So really we're fine. Our research lead is just going to go further and further ahead because at this stage we're researching the megastructures and some of those give you extra research points. Plus, because we have a decent population now, the Birch world can produce research with one of its district types. It's the one you need to build later because it requires exotic materials as upkeep, and one of the earlier districts gives you those. So basically, the spiral upwards is happening. There I was just researching the science nexus, which allows us to multiply our research as well. That's going to be nice and easy. And of course, this war is eventually won. That's another faction in our pocket, ready to be harvested. And I thought while I'm here, I might as well go after the guys that I wanted to kill in the previous part. The guys to the north of the Seban Empire were previously fighting each other, and that meant I couldn't get involved. But now they're at peace, so we can set up on the border, just do the old fake justification for the Protectorate War, and fly on in. All of their systems are clustered together, all of their main systems, up at the other end of their territory, so it's a bit of a journey. But we eventually arrive there, and this faction actually does have some stuff. Despite being in a war, they don't seem to be weakened by it. They've got plenty of ships, but they're split over like 3 systems. So in this case, they probably could have stopped us if they really tried. Luckily, again, because the enemy can't get anywhere near our fleet strength in any particular battle, they won't do any meaningful damage. It's not like a 10,000 strength fleet can kill half of a 20,000 strength fleet or anything like that. If you're not similar in number, you effectively just have 0 strength. So, boom, we kill them all for free. That's the end of that. And now we'll just go around their other fortified positions and take out the enemy just slightly slower than we were with the other factions, but with no more casualties on our side. And we're skipping to the end. Boom, they also get subjugated. We could just keep going, but I decided to go home because while we've been at war, we've got new researches and stuff, so I thought we might as well go home and take a break, upgrade our ships, and then we can always go back and take up someone else as well. To celebrate our victory, we're going to absorb a faction on the way home. I wanted to bring in this sovereignty faction, but I ended up going for that tiny one we were at war with in the first part instead, mainly because you can't integrate 2 factions at the same time, so because I happened to select them first, I was going to integrate them both. I now have to wait, but the long story short is I did integrate them both, so we're cutting now to after that. Suddenly this corner of the galaxy is very empty. It's not quite empty actually, because some of the stations couldn't be disbanded due to them being in combat with random space amoeba fleets that were moving about. Once the space amoebas have killed us, we can disband there and go away. That one I just forgot to get rid of for some reason. And the same thing here, it looked like it was under attack, but it wasn't. And that's the end of those two factions. Apart from this little pocket here, I think while I was integrating the bigger faction, they uplifted a native species or something and created a new faction which technically didn't get involved in the integration. I figured I'll just leave them there. We could go and do the same thing to them, but I thought no, let's leave them. Maybe they'll take over some territory and generate some pops for us. And yes, that's pretty much half the galaxy now empty, although about 1/3 of that half is only empty because there was nobody there at the beginning as far as I can tell. Here's a look at the Birch world. We're getting plenty of the green districts, that's the one that generates research and admin, the resources you can't buy, so they're all important. And we just have to make the yellow districts to generate the exotic materials we need to upkeep the green districts, and just stuff to sell to keep this little market board thing going as we balance our economy by selling and buying from invisible people. Very handy, very overpowered, and our upward spiral is just going to be out of control. We're researching everything, we're building megastructures that will not only give us various advantages like the Sentry Array allowing us to spy on other factions, but things like the Science Nexus accelerates our research. We can make a Penrose Sphere, I think I'm starting to build it here, to get a bunch of free money off this black hole, and basically more resources will come in as a result of the fact we already have too many resources, which then multiplies the problem, and we ultimately just end up funneling all of those resources into buying alloys so that we can make more megastructures, more ships, and be more guaranteed to not have to play the game. We get a boon for my no micro challenge, which is effectively what this really is. The next target on my list, they just straight up surrender. When I go to ask them to be my protectorate so that I can then get the Casus Belli, they just say okay, so we skip the war with them. A pretty good idea. If all the factions were really thinking, they would just do this, because why bother having me come and kill you? You can just get to the same point without the killing by agreeing straight off the bat. So that's that, another faction acquired, so immediately I just look over to the next faction, I'm like, okay, shall I invade them instead? These guys are actually not far off wanting to be my protectorate, and I started thinking maybe we can negotiate our way into being the overlord of other factions. This didn't go particularly well though in the end. We don't have enough population and we're really far away from other factions, so that gives us big debuffs to our chance to get a protectorate deal to go through. Anyway, as you can see, the next thing that happened was I went over to the other side of the galaxy to start conquering someone else, the Dynastic Union here. Apparently I had some fleets already in their territory when the war started, didn't even know about that. But anyway, these guys have territory both over there in the top left and near the Theban Empire in the bottom right. Clearly there is a wormhole linking those two locations that they know about. Anyway, I've already prepared fleets in both locations, fleets strong enough to face off against anything they might have, so we can just plow on in. Here is the major battle of this war. They've got a 10,000 fleet against my 30,000 fleet. Will it do anything to us? Well, not really. I think they did take out one or two of my ships, or force them to retreat, I should say. We'll get them back at some point. Presumably, I don't know where they go when they retreat from battle. I guess they reappear in the fleet later on. We're fine though, we take them out. They did invade my Theban allies during the war, but we went and saved them as well. So here we are, a while later. We've nearly got them, just need someone somewhere to walk into another star system or something to get a few more occupation points. The thing goes over the edge, we offer surrender, they accept it, and boom, we've got another one. During that war, we were also at war with the Brown faction behind them, so the peace treaty means I have a 10-year truce with them, so I can't go straight on and invade them as well. Thus instead, we're going to make a long journey back over here to fight this Violetish faction, or at least that's what I wanted to do. I realised with the way the hyperlanes are, we kind of have to fight this Empire faction to really get into the Violetish faction, so might as well invade them. We're going to have to invade both of them at some point. We do a quick check, see the inferior fleet strength, and we are good to go. It takes 2 in-game years to set up for this war, but once we're here, we can just get right on in there. These guys actually did have a bit more strength than our previous opponents, So here we see a 34,000 strength fleet against a 20-something thousand fleet. That's a little bit more balanced. Luckily I have a 60-something thousand fleet coming in as reinforcements, but this leading fleet is going to face a quote-unquote challenge, but not really, as I said, because of the way the enemy not being able to damage you means they can't reduce your fleet strength. We basically annihilate them. It's just fine. That was the war really. They just lost their main fleet, so we'll go on and take the rest of their territory with a bunch of boring clicking. Here's another battle, because there was another battle and I have to talk about something in this series I suppose, and it's over. They lost another one and as a result they're going to be losing this war. Here was an interesting thing about the Penrose Sphere, or a strange thing. When you build the Penrose Sphere, it gives you the option to turn it into a bomb that destroys nearby systems and planets, aka your systems and planets, because you have to build it in your own territory. I don't really know what the purpose of that is, if maybe you could blow up your own borders to spite the people on the other side or something like that, but we didn't do that, as it happens. A bit later, here's the surrender of this Empire faction, down they go, and now we can set up to attack the Violetish faction in a few different ways. So we set up for that, not even stopping this time to bother repairing our ships, hulls and armour, we just went right on in. Again, they're a bit more challenging than some of our old opponents, but not challenging enough for it to matter in any substantive way. Here's a decisive battle. Looks like we're not really going to lose anything even with our ships pre-damaged, so that's fine. Truly, the no micro gameplay is getting out of control. I barely have to do anything, I just right click a few waypoints in enemy territory, the fleets go out and win us the war. This is more like it. We end up protectorating them. I think the Empire had some claims there, so the Violety faction actually half disappeared as a result of the peace treaty. Doesn't really matter to me. You're all going to get eaten up the same in the end, so it doesn't matter where your territory is now. All looking good for the museum project. The next target on the list, these lobster crabs from the top left, well, they're clearly a sensible species. They just surrender when they see my fleet sitting outside their borders, so that skips over a war with them, very good. And of course we'll just go right through those borders onto the faction that's behind them, the most powerful of the AI factions. They've been the most powerful one the entire time, so I was putting off attacking them strategically, but here we are now. And there's another reason that they're not necessarily that interesting to us. They're a hive mind, and I think that means if I try to absorb their population, all of those pops will just get deleted and die off because they have to be in the hive mind to be alive. Maybe there's some way to get around that. I need to look it up. Feel free to write in the comments. It will be too late for me, but someone else might benefit from seeing it. If there's some way to genetically engineer them to not be in the hive mind or something, then we could use their population. But regardless, I'm just going to fight them and subjugate them so that we can have the full collection for collection purposes. Here was the great battle of this war. You can see we now have 100,000 fleet strength. We're a lot more powerful than the previous wars. These guys have some stuff though. Well, they had some stuff over the last 5 seconds, they lost all of it. So yes, we annihilate them with 100,000 K's worth of fleet. We lose 10k, they lose 50k or something. And the inevitable will now happen. They're going to eventually lose this war once I can be bothered to go around and take all of their stuff. Here, later on, we're at that point. Had to take a whole bunch of planets, didn't even bother finishing off the taking of their space by the looks of things, but we eventually get them to surrender. Whether this will be useful is yet to be seen, because I haven't played further than this in the campaign yet at the time of speaking. But we've got to a pretty good milestone here. We have all of the regular factions that still exist as our protectorate, and we can now just wait, let them do their thing, and pick when we want to absorb them. We can only absorb them one at a time, but that's easy enough. It doesn't take that long to integrate a subject. And we don't really need to integrate them because we have all the pops in the Birch world that you could ever need in terms of generating resources. Bringing more in will allow us to generate even more resources, but there's nothing you can buy with them, so it's kind of pointless. I guess we can just get so many alloys that we can build an absolutely enormous fleet real fast if we need to, that kind of contingency. But then it's probably going to be building capacity rather than resources that hold us back. So I'm kind of happy to chill. I think I'm just gonna sit here until like the endgame crisis happens, and we'll see that in the next part. Or the other thought I had is maybe we can gear up and just go and make the ancient empires into our protectorates as well. I feel like if I attack them, they'll suddenly wake up with a bunch of attack moons and stuff, so maybe my fleet needs to be a bit more powerful before we try that. But I'd be interested in giving it a go. Well, we'll both find out whether I do give it a go in part 3, so join me for that.